Thanks for clicking on to the Tuesday edition of Vogan's European Outlook. In today's video, I want to look at the month of July, a little bit of longer range stuff. Also looking at the Madden-Julian oscillation and also the QBO, which has not been mentioned in quite some time as well. Meteorologist and Professor Eric Snodgrass of Nutrien Ag Solutions was discussing a correlation with the month of July and an easterly QBO phase in a video back recorded last on Sunday evening. So I wanted to show you this graphic that he pulled up, and obviously I want to credit the guy as well for the fact that, you know, it's essentially his research, but an interesting correlation with the month of July and the easterly phase of the QBO, which is quasi-biennial oscillation, as the winds at the 10 millibar level within the stratosphere. It periodically goes between easterly phase and a westerly phase. Back last summer, we had a firmly westerly QBO. We're now in an easterly QBO phase. That is likely to continue into the month of into the winter season. So watch this space with regards to easterly QBO chat as we go through the coming months. But the Madden-Julian oscillation essentially has been relatively quiet in terms of any very strong influence on the mid to high latitude pattern, but it does look as if we are going to be entering a Pacific active MJO phase, which may give the atmosphere that nudge as we move into the July period. So you can see here, greens represent upward motion. The oranges and yellows represent sinking motion within the atmosphere. To give you a better idea what we're looking at here, let's try and blow this up and to see it a little bit better. And you can see here that essentially this is Africa at the very edge of the graphic, India, Sri Lanka, Indian Ocean. This is the maritime continent, or known as Indonesia. We've got Southeast Asia, and also Australia here. We've got South America, the Atlantic, and the edge of Africa, the western side of Africa, at the very edge of the right-hand side of the graphic. The greens, like I say, show rising motion within the atmosphere. So we have seen a sharp uptick in monsoon activity over India. We're also seeing some enhanced rainfall across parts of Southeast Asia, Indonesia, and even parts of northern Australia. But you notice here something quite distinct. This is a 40-day period, and you can see that the GFS is indicating an eastward propagation of the greens representing upward motion. So it shows that the Madden-Julian oscillation is expected to head across the Pacific over the next 40-day period, and this could be somewhat significant in terms of the type of pattern that we could expect over the Atlantic, especially we're talking about the tropics. It's been very quiet. We're likely to not see any sort of development through the remainder of June. In fact, let's have a very quick check on that, because there was one feature. In fact, I'm talking nonsense. We have Tropical Storm Andrea, which has formed. This is the first tropical system. I knew last night that there was a small window of opportunity that a system may develop, but it will very quickly dissipate once again. But interesting to see Andrea, now a tropical storm in the Atlantic basin, 40 miles per hour, moving in a northeasterly direction at 17 miles per hour. It is going to head into a more hostile upper level westerlies, the jet stream, colder waters as well. So this system is a very quick development. But nevertheless, we have got Andrea now formed in the Atlantic. We may see an uptick in activity later on, over the next 3-4 weeks, as that MJO potentially moves into the Atlantic basin. This would be the period now towards the later July and even into the month of August, because we're talking about a 40-day period, and we're already on the 24th of June already. But I want to pull this up here. We have got this graphic that Eric Snodgrass pulled up on his daily videos, Monday to Friday, agweather.com. You can check that out as well. But the Nutrien Ag Solutions is the company based in the United States, and Eric provides some very interesting insight, primarily over the United States, but also globally looks at the agricultural impacts of weather around the planet. But this is essentially a reanalysis. This is a correlation between a July easterly phase of the QBO, or winds blowing out of the east over the equator within the tropics, and this is the type of setup that can develop. We've got an area of high pressure over the western United States up into the north of North America. We've got a trough over the eastern half of the United States. We've also got a trough showing up over the UK and Ireland here with a ridge in between. Now that is somewhat of a negative NAO signal if this was to come to pass. So July 1948 through 2024, this is what an easterly QBO looks like during the month of July. So I just wanted to pull that up for you and show you that. I'll try and leave a link in the description below today's video for this video, and you can watch that back at your leisure. So am I saying that we're going to see a trough over the western UK and also, well, the western half of Europe, including the UK and Ireland, during the month of July? That remains to be seen. We obviously have very warm sea surface temperature anomalies now showing up over the and surrounding the UK. So if we pull up this chart here, this is showing the current sea surface temperature anomalies, and we have got significantly warm waters over the Western Mediterranean basin here. Record level warm sea surface temperatures for this time of the year in the Western Med. We've also got very warm waters in the North Sea and waters within the Atlantic to the west of the UK and Ireland here. We've also got an area of colder than average over the central North Atlantic south of Greenland. You could argue the point that do we start to see an area of high... Now, this could go either way, by the way. Remember, we have got very dry conditions over Europe, very warm waters surrounding the European landmass. This could go either way. We could enhance lower pressure, or we could enhance higher pressure surrounding the UK and Ireland and Western Europe with this SST profile. With the water temperatures colder than average over the central North Atlantic, there's a bit of a 2014-2015 cold blob look about this, with warmest waters around Europe, coolest waters south of Greenland over the central North Atlantic. Now, what you could argue is that could actually enhance an area of high pressure over that colder than average waters, lower pressure over the UK and Ireland, something that correlates reasonably well with this, the East QBO during the month of July correlation here, with a trough over Western Europe, ridge over that colder than average water temperatures in the central North Atlantic, a trough over the eastern half of the United States as well. So that's another interesting scenario to take into consideration. Now, this is what the ECMWF seasonal is looking like in terms of precipitation, and it's actually looking drier than average across much of Europe here. Not good news, considering that we have got quite a serious drought situation unfolding across Europe. We've obviously had a very powerful upper level ridge of high pressure that's been dominating central and southern areas of Europe here, and that is likely to continue. But do we have the opportunity of change later down the road with this East QBO correlation combined with the very warm water temperatures? I mean, this month could go either way, and I have highlighted the fact in my summer forecast that we could have a very variable July, high heat events lifting north up into the UK. But also remember, June has had a strong Icelandic low just to the north of the UK and Ireland. We've had a very powerful area of high pressure over Central Europe, and there's been this kind of battle, tug of war between the Icelandic low and the high over Europe throughout the month of June so far. In terms of the temperature anomalies for the month, this is how it's looking. Relatively cool across Scandinavia, eastern areas of Europe, central and western Europe, warmer than average. And like I say, this is the ECM seasonal in terms of precipitation anomaly, sorry, for the month of July here. In terms of surface pressure anomaly for the same period, it looks like this here, which is not particularly different in a sense to what we're seeing in that correlation with the QBO here. It looks as if we've got a higher pressure up towards Iceland. We've got higher pressure over the central North Atlantic. We've also got lower pressure that extends all the way down to Iberia. And if we look at the graphic once again, it's indicating that we have got lower pressure down here. Now, this could be heat driven. Remember, this is mean sea level pressure anomaly. We've got higher than average pressure to the north and lower pressure extended to the south. In terms of temperature anomaly here, this is how it's looking for the month of July off the model. Warmer than average pretty much across the board. And in terms of upper level heights, this is how it's looking here. So we've not got a particularly great clear cut signal, but nevertheless, it's interesting to see that showing up. So like I say, the month of July still open. The uncertainty also depends on, see, remember, as we move towards the middle portions of the summer, we've got less momentum within the atmosphere. Some of the teleconnections, like the MJO, doesn't essentially influence things overly well. However, what can happen is if we start to get an MJO that moves into the Atlantic basin, we see an uptick in tropical cyclone activity, that could have significant influence. I think the tropics within the Atlantic becomes more of a player in the European weather pattern mid to late summer, as we start to get more involvement within the tropics. June, July tends to have very little in the way of influence on the European pattern. That has to be taken into consideration as well here. But yes, there's a lot of uncertainty with regards to the month of July, but the concern is this is an updated European Drought Observatory graphic for the first 10 days of June, and you can see that the drought has increased in intensity over England and Wales here, even parts of Ireland. Scotland is still not looking particularly great either, and then as we move into the heart of Central Europe, that's where there is areas of concern with regards to ridging taking place. So I just wanted to show you that. Let's have a quick look at the Copernicus suite of models. Yes, I will try and get there in the end, but you can see here, this is with regards to the month of July according to the DWD model. And you can see this is 850 temperature profile here, and you can see warmer than average across the majority of Europe, including the UK and Ireland, in terms of 850 temperature anomalies here. Looking at the ECMWF, 850 temps for July, again, firmly warmer than average across the bulk of Europe, including the UK and Ireland. Let's skip on then and see what the precipitation anomaly is looking like for the month of June, or July, should I say. You can see here, this is actually temperature again. Bear with a second here. So let's look at the BOM model first, which is the Bureau of Meteorology in Australia. It's let's look at Europe specifically then and see what it's showing here. So it's showing a dry south, wet north. And that is the overall thinking for the whole summer. June, and yes, even July as well, potentially a wetter north, drier south. Let's have a quick look then at the multi-system run, which is all the models: ECMWF, Met Office, Minio France, CMCC, DWD, NCEP, JMA, ECCC, and the BOM model here, and it's indicating a firmly drier than average signal for July over Europe, and that would indicate continued strong region of high pressure over Europe, which is rather interesting actually. Let's have a quick look at the ECMWF model and see what it's indicating here. Again, firm dry signal. Let's look zoom in to Europe. We've got this firm dry signal extending into the southern half of the British Isles here. So there is quite a strong agreement in the models that the drier than average would maintain itself as we move into the month of July here. Let's have a quick look at another model here. Let's look at the Met Office model here. And it looks as if it's got a very wet north, drier south. Is it? No, not really. Again, let's zoom into Europe. And you can see here a wetter north, but again, that dry signal continues to show up over, much of Central Europe, extending into the southern half of both the UK as well as Ireland. Now, we do have a fairly warm day out there across the south. Southern Europe, hot, less hot across the north of Europe here. But let's look specifically at the UK. And again, we've got this fresher conditions across the northern UK. Temperatures knocking the door 30 again across the southeast. So, we've got a jet separating, a cooler, fresher north, and much warmer conditions across the southern half of the UK. Now, what is interesting is, as we move through the course of this week, we are seeing a major heat dome affecting the eastern half of the United States. That contrast between something cooler across Hudson Bay and the intense heat and humidity across the eastern United States is creating an unusually powerful jet in the contrast between the two air masses here. That then extends out into the Atlantic basin, but we've got a very important little dip taking place over the North Atlantic, which is going to force high pressure within Biscay to lift northwards. Watch this here. Look at how strong this jet is. Remember that we are approaching the end of June. Yes, you do get an uptick in the westerlies during the second half of June, usually, climatologically speaking, because we increase the temperature gradient across the northern hemisphere, so that strengthens the jet. We'll see this decrease in westerly momentum during the springtime, and then actually it becomes stronger as we move into the summer months. But we've got an unusually strong jet at the moment. But this setup right here is important. We've got an area of low pressure between Iceland and Greenland at 984 according to the GFS model. That is forcing cooler air out of Greenland, drop south. It actually forces the jet to then dip south over the North Atlantic, and the high then pushes the jet further north over the UK and Ireland. So as we move towards next weekend, or this upcoming weekend, should I say, we do have a jet that's running across the top of Scotland, but we've got higher pressure, warmer air mass coming into the southern UK and Ireland here, and therefore we are going to see an uptick in temperature. Let's have a quick look at the weathercharts.com and see what it's showing here. Let's zoom out, and you can see here that we've got this westerly flow, relatively slack. We did have very strong winds yesterday, by the way. My weather station recorded a gust of 51.5 kilometers per hour, which is actually a new summer wind speed record for this station. Now, the station is only 2.5 years old, so obviously it's a very short period of record, but that gust yesterday evening of 51.5 kilometers per hour was my strongest wind gust for the month of June, July, and August combined, which I thought was quite interesting. Some very gusty winds yesterday indeed. We continue with this westerly airflow here through the course of the week, but notice this low developing here. So this is the overview precip cloud temperature and pressure chart here. We've got this strong area of low pressure, relatively speaking, over the North Atlantic. Remember, we've got this stronger jet exit North America. We've got the contrast between the warmer and the subtropics, and that cooler air getting drawn out of Greenland, getting tugged out of Greenland thanks to that position of the low. But it's building and it's forcing high pressure to build over the southern UK, extending from Biscay up into the southern UK. If we look at the 850 temperatures then of the GFS model, you can see the warmer air coming back into place. Now, this is Wednesday, but continue to play through here. You notice what happens here as we start to see this colder air getting drawn south out of the Baffin Straits. It's then deepening this area of low pressure as it's making an approach towards the region between Scotland and Iceland, and that is going to pull some of this warmth out of Biscay, out of Iberia, out of France, up into the UK as we move towards the weekend coming up. And it looks as if even Sunday and Monday is going to be the warmest spell. Now, we are going to see much fresher conditions across the far northwest, across Ireland, but again, that southeast corner of the UK susceptible to some fairly notable warmth. Let's have a quick look at the ECMWF to see what it's indicating here. Same story. So the models are coming together with that overall solution. Low pressure somewhere to the northwest of the UK and Ireland. We've got this much fresher air getting driven south over the North Atlantic, extend all the way into the northern Azores, if you notice here, but it's then forcing the southerly winds to lift this heat up into the southeast of the British Isles during the course of the weekend and into the early portions of next week. All open to question with regards to what takes place beyond that here. There's a lot of variance in the models with regards to the high over Europe and whatnot. So yeah, we'll continue to watch this going forward here. Interesting days to come. I hope you're enjoying what you're seeing here on the channel. Like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you again tomorrow with more. Bye for now.